maybe your database lookup and share it amongst the devices, the better off you are. You don't want to get into a situation where you have a lot of stateful devices doing the query. If you go to an SBC, it does a query, it just simply tells you the next hop SBC, which does a query, which tells you the next hop SBC, right? You have to be careful of that. You don't, because certainly in that case, you could have 10 different routes in every device. You need to control the user experience, right? So
right, then the problem becomes, how do we determine who controls the full routing unit in the sequence? So,
absolutely. Well, that's where you have some state information on SBC.
Yeah, SBC keeps some state, but it's just local state, really.
Right.
But I've seen implementations where they use enum internally, or a separate direct server, or a gatekeeper to essentially manage route information across multiple devices. It's not that there's multiple models like that, and you can do it internally or even for external routes.
Right. It's just that the way it's evolving, right, with the many devices one user having, the question really becomes, I'm routing to not necessarily a device, but to a user. So the moment when it crosses, only some domains may have the intelligence of certain set of devices. Now, only that domain will know how to route between those devices, whereas some other entity may not know. So
yeah, presumably within a carrier's network, they would have all the information they need.
it's one carrier.
Yeah, within a carrier. If you're going across another carrier, you need federations in case of enum or some other approach.
That's some other approach. I think we're only beginning to be able to tap that power that you can implement with that stateful and horizon-aware device, right, such as a session border controller at the edge of the network. So we'll add that and we can have discussions about that in a different next year panel. Maybe.
Any other questions? And Jim, do you have any, we heard about using session border controller as the as port switch, and I think you have some stories to share with us about this.
Well, I think, the experiences we have is really, well, it's what all these men have set up here. And Glen, I think, you said it very well, example of customers, routing calls based on the ANI and the DNS. And it's really, the experiences I would share really reaffirm what y'all have already said. We're using the session border controller as a class 4 switch for handling calls based on the source of the call. And your point, we talked about calls that come into a carrier's network in an SBC and maybe transit that network and go out in an SBC in a different part of the world. Exactly that kind of case where their routing calls that come in across their network and then out ingress and egress calls, all based on the source of the call within their network IP, whether it's external or their own SBC, and then going out for lease calls termination. So it definitely, from our point, we see all those points of view, and also, I guess, I do want to just say again what we see. It's interesting is we see people using our routing platform to manage all the least cost routes, but they're also launching enum queries from our routes. So I don't feel like we're confusing things, that there are lots of different queries when you move the routing off the platform, but we have customers that absolutely, they have their own least cost routing, their own routing policies they use to manage for their network. But they also have set up enum queries to other routing databases, either within their own network or could be with partners. When a call comes in, I first want to check enum database because that'll be the lowest cost route. And if there's not an enum route, I don't know what those are because those are changing all the time dynamically in the remote enum server. If there's no enum route, then I'm going to use my least cost routing lookup in my own network. So that's, I guess, just kind of a variation of what that we see coming in. There is going to be, some kind of, cascading route lookups as well as cascading supplements.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you will have that, and you'll have policies that influence the route lookup, and we're pretty agnostic when it comes to that, whether you want to do a flow through with a policy on the session border controller or flow through and in the database. There are powerful databases that allow you to do the flow through lookup, and we really like those types of capabilities. So and it does depend upon the implementation. That keeps you down, keeps the cycles down, and allows you to scale.
It certainly does seem like it's a configuration choice for the network designer to look at their particular capacity requirements, their particular routing requirements. Most of the SBCs can be configured to do probably what you want it to do, either with internal routing databases or external routing databases. It's pretty much up to the network designer. The nice thing is you have these tools that you can optimize for your particular cost and service.
Any other questions from the audience? No? So do you have a final word to say about the topic?
It's an exciting time to be in communications. It's a difficult, very competitive time, but with the dynamic changes that you see being announced every day at forums like this, it's very interesting. We're all very lucky.
It's true, it is, and it's a time of innovation. We're able to do a lot more things, I think, because of that IP infrastructure out there that allow us to peer directly using voice. We need to be very sensitive to the user experience while we enable these services. We don't want to give up our carrier class and that PSTN nature of the voice experience just to enable the flexibility and try to shave some few pennies off of your routing. But certainly we believe in routing within and external to the SBC.
I'd agree, and I'd add that it's not only going to be a voice. IPX proxy, I think, is a good example of that, where you're seeing multimedia coming into the picture. Certainly, mobile broadband access, you're going to see all kinds of different services beyond voice.
I think a really interesting thing is the openness of these network elements really makes innovation, I think, much quicker and lower cost. I think that's one thing that new entrants in this business benefit from is, in the past, if you bought a Nortel switch, somebody spoke earlier about, Gary Kim was talking about he was in the CLEC business. They bought a Lucent switch and they offered all the same services as everybody else that had a Lucent switch, and they got killed in the marketplace because all they could do was compete on price. But with the openness of these network elements like the session border controllers, there's so much flexibility, especially when you decouple the policies, the business policies, and it's through an open interface. It really makes it much easier to develop your own unique set of services and products quickly at a much lower cost. That really gives these new entrants a lot of flexibility compared to the folks who are competing with a Lucent or a Nortel switch as far as the legacy network.
So basically, if we want to look at what we can take away from this, looks like it makes sense to decouple routing intelligence from the session border controller when you're going to get into big troubles if you have huge routing databases. So it really depends on the scale of your network. You can start small. If you are starting a business small with that routing intelligence coupled with the SBC, but if you get very successful quickly enough, then you'll face some issues about routing databases. This is what we can get from this. And now you might think about who these service providers might be. If you look at small VoIP providers who made it very strongly, you can think about, you can go to Japan with SoftBank, you can go to France with Iliad's Free. To an age, about 2.5 million VoIP subscribers. Well, you have to look at the cable MSOs and think about what they're doing. But on the other hand, you also may think about people like iBasis, who started small in the late 90s and now are number 3 VoIP wholesale carrier. And that architecture actually is very interesting in the sense that they do have a distributed session border controller network, as they call it. But the routing intelligence is actually centralized into what they call their routing engine. They have developed their own routing engine. So that is a good case study of decoupling routing intelligence from the session border controller, and still using a huge network of session border controller worldwide, because we're talking about worldwide networking here. So thank you very much for your attention and your participation, which made this session very successful. And I'd like to thank all panelists from Glen, Dalton, Ravi, and Jim, and enjoy the rest of the day.